German planes were falling out of the sky, and none of Hitler's advisors had any answers. One after another, state-of-the-art Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Bf-110s were lighting up the sky. Not with gunfire, but because they were exploding. A Heinkel bomber pilot was the next casualty. The Luftwaffe was being attacked by a seemingly otherworldly force, and the German brass was panicking. Unable to protect their squadrons, the only solution was to deploy planes. But the result was the same. How could this be? And it didn't end there. Warships and tanks below were being wiped out as fast as they could be deployed, and German ground troops were forced to take cover and look to the skies for answers. When the unidentified, unexplainable attacker was spotted, the panic reached an even greater height. The German victory was slipping away, and the entire strategy developed by Axis war planners was being dismissed by a single Allied craft in the sky, the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. That's just one possible scenario that German forces would have faced had the advanced fighter jet been available to Allied forces on D-Day. And there are many other scenarios they would have been faced with. But could one fighter jet take down the entire German military force? Today on Sketchy Tunes, we're going to examine what might have happened if a single F-22 showed up on D-Day. The German Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Bf-110 were awe-inspiring planes that struck fear into the hearts of Allied pilots. They reached top speeds of 426 and 336 miles per hour, respectively. The 109 took its two 13mm machine guns and a 30mm cannon to 40,000 feet in the air. The 110 was equipped with four 8mm machine guns and two 20mm cannons, and could patrol the skyline at 20,000 feet. That all sounds pretty impressive, until you understand the capabilities of the F-22 Raptor. Developed in 2005, the F-22 can hit speeds just shy of Mach 2. What does that mean in real numbers? It means that it can reach speeds of 1,500 miles per hour, 3.5 times the speed of the Messerschmitt Bf-109, and 4.5 times faster than the 110. At that speed, German gunners would be virtually powerless to knock it out of the sky with their primitive targeting systems. Adding to their confusion, the F-22 can operate at heights of up to 70,000 feet, nearly twice the height of the Messerschmitt Bf-109. So forget the primitive targeting systems. Luftwaffe pilots would likely never have a chance to see the death dealer above them before it was too late. And thanks to air-to-air missiles, it would be over quickly. AIM-120 Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missiles, also called AMRAAMs, travel at speeds of up to Mach 4. That's just over an astonishing 3,000 miles per hour, and faster than a bullet fired from most guns. And it can lock onto a target as far as 62 miles away. The Messerschmitt's cannons fired at a rate of about 750 rounds per minute, and their machine guns slightly less, but that wouldn't really matter since they'd never see the target, and they'd be nothing more than a flash in the sky within seconds. The F-22 is equipped with machine guns in case they've already used their 6 AIM-120 missiles to lay waste to unsuspecting pilots. And they're just as impressive as their missile arsenal. The F-22 Raptor comes equipped with an M61A2 20mm Gatling gun, which is a 6-barrel rotary cannon that can fire 6,000 rounds per minute. These numbers alone might have possibly made Hitler and his cronies rethink the entire war. There are currently only 186 F-22s in service, but considering the carnage that just one of these technological marvels could wreak in the skies, that would certainly be more than enough to make Hitler wave the white flag. But how much cause for concern would just one of them be, really? They certainly have limitations, and the Germans would certainly make adjustments in the air, and most importantly, on the ground. When word got back to Hitler about what was happening in the skies, he almost certainly wouldn't believe it. But when it was confirmed, the logical response would be to choke off the supply chain. Strength in numbers would be the only thing he could rely on, so dispatching more planes would be a reasonable response, for two reasons. First, the more eyeballs they could get on the unidentified craft, the more they could learn about its capabilities and limitations. And more importantly, when it had expended its resources, they'd have more artillery to try and knock it out of the sky. Using the Messerschmitt's weaponry to go toe-to-toe with British and other Allied forces clearly wouldn't work against the F-22, so Hitler would have to make it a game of attrition and attack when it was vulnerable. Both the Bf-109 and 110 were twin pilot planes, meaning there was a dedicated gunner who focused only on the target. That presented a window of opportunity for the Axis fighters, as long as they could avoid the Allied pilot's crosshairs long enough for him to run out of ammo or fuel. No German plane was equipped to deal with anything that moves as fast as an F-22, so finding the crosshairs would mean certain death. They weren't equipped to shoot down any missile that targeted them, and they clearly couldn't outmaneuver a craft that traveled at nearly 5 times their speed. I've already mentioned the capabilities of the devastating AIM-120 missiles and 6-barrel 20mm Gatling gun on board, but there's more. The F-22 comes equipped with 2 spots for AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. These harbingers of death are equipped with an infrared homing guidance system and an optical targeting system that doesn't allow for mistakes. The infrared guidance capability would allow the missile to lock in on any of the Messerschmitt's craft's exhaust, and that meant game over. Making things even more unfortunate for anyone in an Axis war machine, these Sidewinder missiles allow the F-22 pilot complete freedom to disengage from the target after it's been fired, and not have to worry about it finding the mark. Did I mention that AIM-9s can reach speeds of more than 1,900 miles per hour and have a range of more than 20 miles? Well, they can, and they do. Now that you're up to speed on the specifications and the problems that Hitler and his colleagues would face, how many aircraft do you think he'd need to take down one F-22? The total number of German aircraft that were equipped to take to the skies in World War II numbered 119,871. It would be foolish to suggest that one fighter jet could take down such a force, but there were other factors at play as well. If too much attention was placed on the technological marvel, the other Allied forces would gain a huge advantage. That's why getting as many eyes on it was of paramount importance. Luftwaffe pilots would have to know if it could strike, or if it had exhausted its arsenal and was nothing more than a decoy for the other Allied fighters. Anyone chasing the F-22 was faced with a catch-22. Even though the only opportunity to strike would come after the pilot had no projectile weaponry left, the jet itself was a weapon. With its unmatched speed and maneuverability, the F-22 pilot could lead Luftwaffe pilots into any number of traps and setups for the other Allied fighters. The Messerschmitts would have to pursue and put themselves into those dangerous situations because it was their best and only opportunity to strike. It would be far less risky than pursuing a fully weaponized craft, but it would be far from optimal. After the massive air losses, Hitler may decide to scale back his dogfighting focus and strike at the heart, the ground stations. If he put less Luftwaffe pilots in that seemingly unwinnable predicament, focusing on taking out the refueling and rearmament stations might be the best bet. But once again, that would open yet another door that the F-22 could use to attack. Because it wasn't just designed for dogfights, it could be loaded with air-to-ground missiles. That's right, it wouldn't have to be used just to provide protection for Allied bombers. It is a bomber. The fighter could be loaded with up to 2 GBU-32 Joint Direct Attack Munition bombs, or as many as 8 GBU-39B small-diameter bomb weapon systems for annihilating anything below. Utilizing the JDAM guidance system, GBU-32 dumb bombs could be transformed into all-weather, smart, guided bomb units. The 2 GBU-32s weigh 1,000 pounds each, and the JDAM system provides a 95% reliability rate, with a target accuracy of within 10 meters. Dropping a 1,000-pound bomb within 10 meters of a target is a bullseye every time. If that isn't impressive and terrifying enough to Hitler, the GBU-39B might be even more impressive. The 39B has a range of 46 miles, and the targeting system provides a 90% hit rate, whether the pilot chooses a single target or multiple targets at once. Each of the 8 small-diameter bombs weighs 250 pounds, way more than enough for a total destruction. Changing up the strategy and using the F-22 as a bomber would force the Luftwaffe pilots to fight yet another losing battle. They could focus on protecting the ground stations and get picked apart by Allied Spitfires, Thunderbolts, Mustangs, and Hurricanes, or focus on them and sacrifice their ground forces. And of course, the F-22 pilot will know immediately what their focus was because of yet another technological marvel at his disposal, an APG-77 radar system. The APG-77 has a lightning-fast scan time, utilizing a 120-degree field of view, and would allow the pilot to detect any German aircraft from more than 320 miles away. To put that in perspective, if a Messerschmitt Bf-109 would reach the F-22 within an hour, while pursuing at its top speed of 426 miles per hour, the radar would pick it up when it was still 45 minutes away. Sneak attacks were out of the question, and that information would be provided to all the Allied forces, and could be used as yet another tactical weapon, especially against ground forces. Nazi tanks would be sitting ducks and destroyed with one bomb. If they happened to be clustered, multiple tanks would be destroyed by a single blast. In the water, the Scharnhorst-class ships in the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, would face the same fate as the tank units when hit with any of the smart bombs. So all of this begs the question, could the Germans provide any response to the juggernaut F-22? As far as taking it on head-to-head, they had one option that might have risen above the rest. Using the world's first operational cruise missile, the V-1 flying bomb. It was officially called the Fieseler F-1103 by the Reich Aviation Ministry, but unofficially it was known as Höllenhund or Hellhound. Allied forces called it the Doodlebug and Buzz Bomb because of the sounds it made as it approached its target. The V-1 was a main weapon used against Allied forces and may have had some success against the F-22. Though it had limited range, it could be loaded into several German aircraft, including the Heinkel HE-111 bombers. And though it was terribly inaccurate, it had a range of 150 miles, and its payload was a 1-ton warhead. Finnish soldiers reported that the Hellhound's impact was devastating, leaving craters that measured nearly 100 feet wide, and they were the Nazis' preferred weapon during the London bombings. Though it would likely take an extreme stroke of luck to catch an F-22 with such an inaccurate blast, it would likely be one of the Germans' better options during a chaotic sequence. Next on Hitler's to-do list might be to employ the feared Flak 36 and 37 anti-aircraft systems. The Flak 36 was an 88mm anti-aircraft and anti-tank multi-purpose weapon, a high-velocity gun that caused projectiles to fill the sky with jagged metal fragments that knifed through any aircraft fuselage like butter. But it had glaring limitations. Allied planes flying at an altitude above 13,800 feet were out of range, and it could only fire its 20-pound projectiles 20 times per minute. The Flak 37 had upgraded sights, barrels, and firing mechanisms, but they suffered from the same range limitations. Because of these known limitations, it seems likely that they'd become easy targets for the F-22, and if so, they'd be destroyed easily with any of the fighter jets' onboard weaponry. With all the limitations of the top German weaponry exposed, Hitler would have to learn from what would undoubtedly be massive losses and focus on the F-22's limitations. But what were they? The most obvious one is the limited arsenal capacity. The F-22 can carry a maximum of 450 rounds for the 20mm cannon and 8 missiles. While the guidance systems would ensure a nearly perfect hit rate, the need to refuel and reload could be an issue. Its exact fuel capacity, and therefore range, is classified information, but it's believed to be able to carry about 18,000 pounds of fuel in its internal tanks, with the option of adding external tanks for extended missions. As I mentioned previously, the best opportunity to attack the F-22 would be during its return to base. However, the best strategy to keep it on the ground would be to fill the sky with extra bombers and focus on taking out refueling stations while it's cutting through Luftwaffe squadrons. The Nazi brass would have to be willing to sacrifice as many pilots as necessary in order to starve the stealthy juggernaut of fuel and ammunition. The next best option would be to focus on changing the strategy to one that didn't focus on taking out the F-22, but instead promoted an area that it couldn't do anything about. In the deep sea, German U-boats were armed with deck-mounted guns and as many as 16 self-propelled torpedoes. Their existence kept Winston Churchill up at night, and he claimed, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." While that sounds pretty promising, if you're a Nazi, the effectiveness of the torpedoes proved to be unreliable, so many attacks were carried out on the surface. Torpedoes were built with one of 2 types of pistol triggers installed: impact, which meant the warhead would detonate after hitting a solid object, and magnetic, which would theoretically cause the warhead to detonate when it detected a change in the magnetic field within a few meters. But of course, these were primitive technologies, and the torpedoes regularly followed at an improper depth, blew up prematurely, or didn't explode at all. Sometimes they bounced off the hull of the target ship, doing no damage and blowing the attacker's cover. Surface attacks allowed German soldiers to board the enemy ships, but with an F-22 lurking overhead, the submarine and everyone aboard would be dead in the water. There would be no direct path and no clear plan for Hitler to follow to ensure the elimination of a single F-22. I've mentioned several he most certainly would have tried, but it would have taken some stroke of luck to see the aircraft from the future explode into a fireball or nosedive into the sea. One of these seemingly invincible fighter jets certainly wouldn't have been able to take out every Luftwaffe squadron single-handedly, but it certainly would have saved many lives. It may have even caused Hitler to surrender. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.